you ever been in a situation where things are going fairly well in your life, and then just one day it seems like the bottom drops out, and you're left wondering what just happened? And then as things don't get better, you're tempted to say, God, where are you? Have you abandoned me? Certainly, this may be what Joseph may have felt in Genesis chapter 39. You see, his brothers had sold him into slavery, and he wound up in Potiphar's household in Egypt. And it says there in verse 2 that God was with Joseph. Joseph's situation was pretty bad. He was a slave. He was held against his will. He did not want to be in Egypt. He wanted to be home with his family. And yet, verse 2 clearly says God did not abandon Joseph. In fact, he was with him and he gave him success. So much success in that atmosphere that Potiphar recognized that God was giving him success and put him in charge of everything in his house. And you think, well, that's great. End of story. Things went well for Joseph. And that's not really how it turns out. In fact, in that state of his having great success, Potiphar's wife took notice of Joseph, who was also pretty handsome, and decided to tempt him by saying, come, lie with me, sleep with me. And Joseph refused day after day to do that until one day she entrapped him. There was nobody else around, no other witnesses, and she grabbed him by his coat and said, please lie with me. And he rejected her and fled, leaving his very garment in her hands. Well, she decides, in her being rebuffed, to falsely accuse Joseph of attempting to rape her, which winds Joseph up in prison. Now, this is not the end of Joseph's story. We're going to pick this up in chapter 40 and beyond. But in this moment, if you're like most people, if you're in Joseph's shoes, you're pretty sure that God is not for you. In fact, he's probably against you. You're in slavery, and now you've been wrongly accused, and you're now in prison. But the text says God was with Joseph, and he gave him success. In fact, when Joseph winds up in prison, the same type of wording, that God was with Joseph in prison and gave him favor with the chief jailer. And the same thing ends up that the chief jailer puts Joseph in charge of everything, all the other prisoners. So, first of all, when you're in a difficult situation, you feel like the whole world is against you, recognize this, that God is not. He is for you. And even in the midst of those circumstances, though we don't understand always why they are happening in our life and what actions or greater purpose there is in that might be good, understand that God is with you. He's not left you, and he has given you strength and perhaps even favor in that difficult circumstance. The second thing that we see in Joseph is that his character does not vary. You see, our circumstances don't define who we are, but they do reveal our character. When we get in a difficult place, do we just feel tempted to give up and curse God and decide to indulge certain sinful behaviors as a result? Or do we stay true to our faith? You see, Joseph, when tempted by Potiphar's wife, said, how could I do this thing against God? How could I sin against God? And how could I sin against my master who has shown such kindness to me? We see the character of Joseph revealed. It's these difficult circumstances that reveal either good or sometimes bad character in us. Either way, we are by necessity growing, have a potential to grow. Either recognizing something that needs to be developed in us or something that's already there that God is choosing to develop even further. Let us keep our eyes focused on God, who is always with us. Allow him to develop the character who, as a result, will develop maturity in us, that we would lack nothing, that would be ready for every work that God would have before us. And certainly God has a specific work for Joseph ahead that he is preparing him for. So for this upcoming Sunday, I want to encourage you to read ahead. Read chapter 40, 41, 42, and beyond, because we're going to see how God is strategically putting Joseph in a particular position to not only aid his family, but actually rescue the entire nation of Egypt and all the surrounding peoples. So read ahead, and we'll see you there at 10:30 on Sunday morning.